everybody. For those that celebrate, what is it, Good Friday going into Easter
Yes.
this weekend. So we're back here again. I wanted to share some additional insights. I know for those of you that are not even just baseball players, we also got lacrosse this time of year, softball, all the spring sports are in full effect. So whether you're going to a tournament, a game, practice today, in the coming days, I find these conversations to be really helpful, even just from my perspective as a mom, as I try to process what this means to be a travel baseball mom with my 12-year-old athlete. So I was sharing with Lynn how interesting it can be when you're raising a child that may not see the world in the same way that you do, right? And it's not that we want to create clones of our kids, but it's also being able to be aware of how they show up and what they need to perform at their best. So I'll give this quick little kind of story about my son Kavanaugh. When he was probably 3 or 4, one of the milestones at that age is to be able to follow multi-step directions. So whether you tell them, go get your shoe, meet me at the door, grab your backpack. And so he would always skip one of the steps, but it was never the first or the last, which most people would think, oh, they forgot the first or the last. He would get like the second and then the fourth steps. And somehow like it was always different. And it like racked my brain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? And when you're a mom for the first time, that's really when you start to try to diagnose any little thing you think is a problem. So I'm like, why can't he like consistently get these pieces? Because I'm like, for me, I would have been able to remember. So, I'm always comparing, at that point, comparing what I would have done at that age to what he was doing. And I even like took him to brain training and paid thousands of dollars for him to do brain training because I was convinced that his processing speed was off and there was something going on with his processing speed. And that's why he wasn't able to get each of the steps. And it wasn't until, of course, the lady let me go through $3,000 worth of brain training and do all these tests. And she's like, oh no, his processing speed is extremely high. He's in the 99th percentile. She said, that's not the problem at all. And I'm like sitting there like, oh no, what is it? And I'm thinking it's, something more deeper than that. She said, oh, his first language is Chinese. And I'm like, okay. So at the time, he had been in Chinese immersion programs for the first 3 years of his life. And she's like, he's actually taking what you're saying to him. He hears it in English. He's translating it into Chinese to then translate it back into English to understand what you're saying. And so in the process of all that, imagine like, a computer glitching, he's missing some of the pieces. And so what he's remembering is literally from just brute force. And I remember thinking like, wow, I never even considered that. And so, in the 12 years that I've had this experience to be on this joy of parenting with him, I've started to realize and see, all the different ways that we are alike, but in so many different ways, the way that he sees the world in a very completely and unique perspective, right? And so I share that because in his baseball journey, what I've noticed is when he's in environments, typically environments with his peers, so kids that are around his age, he blends in, right? He kind of has a different persona in terms of the type of athlete he is. But as soon as you tell him he can't do something, or he shouldn't, or he's not allowed to, or you put him in an environment with kids that are 2, 3, or 4 years older than him that have a different skill set and more advanced skill set, he becomes a completely different athlete. Like you can almost see like a light switch. It flickers off, flickers on. And so last August, he played as a guest player in a tournament with kids that were almost 2 years older than him. And obviously, when you're playing at that level, the pitching is going to be coming faster, right? The game is at a faster pace because those kids are much older. And he excelled. He even hit a home run, right? But then I noticed, like when he's with his peer group, it's not that he doesn't do well. It's just not at that same kind of intensity level that I know he's capable of. So I was mentioning it to Lynn, and I was like, I was sitting here racking my brain trying to figure out like what is it me? Like I don't want to, be one of those parents that kind of vicariously lives through our kids where we push them in a direction where maybe they're not ready to go or maybe they don't even want to go in. And so I kind of did some research and I came across kind of a couple different profiles of what an athlete is and really what motivates them to excel at their best. And one of the things that I came across is that Kavanaugh is a um challenge responsive type of athlete, meaning if there is no challenge there, his brain kind of shuts off and so he coasts, right? He just kind of is on cruise control. So he does just enough to blend in, but not enough to stand out. But as soon as you give him that challenge, and whether that challenge is something he internally tells himself or it's an external challenge that's put on because maybe the pitcher is throwing harder or the stakes are higher, then all of a sudden his brain activates, right? And he's able to perform at this higher level. So I was talking to Lynn about it because I thought that was such an interesting concept Because me as a parent, I'm like sitting looking at the stands, seeing something completely different, and I'm like, what is happening? And so it was interesting to now kind of have some language to that, and we can even run through some of the other types of motivation that athletes may have, so that you can kind of get a feel for what may be motivating your athlete, so that you can create those training plans, and more importantly, help them get those mindset pieces that really help them uniquely unlock who they are. So I'll turn it over to you, Len. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on what I just shared.
Perfect, thank you. And yes, you're right. There are actually six motivation types. As you said, Kavanaugh's the challenge responsive motivation type.
Hmm.
Then there's goal oriented motivation, identity driven motivation, team based relationship driven motivation, and routine responsiveness motivation, and finally, recognition based validation motivation. Now, kids can also have a primary and a secondary.
Hmm.
So often, what I've seen in Kavanaugh, he is challenge responsive motivated, but he's also goal oriented motivated as a
Hmm.
secondary. And one of the things you were saying about the language, it's important not to say negative words like you can't do that or something like that. It's more, here's some positive language you can use. I notice how focus sharpens when facing your toughest opponents. Now we've
Hmm.
seen that in Kavanaugh in real life. When he's with the under 13s and he's got to step up, he steps up. His focus really sharpens when he's facing that toughness. And like last time when he said the bowler was throwing really hard, but he stepped up. And I
Yeah.
remember him saying that he was the only one that didn't get struck out.
Yeah.
And so, but it's still very important to use the language. So it's something like you have this remarkable ability to elevate your game when it matters most.
Hmm.
And so what I've done is I've put together kind of a document that we can share with people, and it talks through the six different languages. But I remember saying to Kavanaugh and spotting very early on that he stretch goals. He likes stretch goals.
Yeah.
If they're ordinary, he's not playing, like you say. He's kind of like, yeah, done with that. Um, so we stretch him. We go through his goals. We've set. I mean, he's got six main goals, which is unusual for a child, but they're in different areas. One is baseball, but we look at academia. We look at his playtime, and we look at kind of his creativity time in his piano. We look at all these other things because his brain is that challenge responsiveness
Yeah.
motive type where you give him the challenge and we set his goals at the beginning of the year and then we go through where are you with your goals, and if he sees he's falling behind in what he's trying to achieve, he will do what he can to do better the next time,
Yeah.
and he will go above and beyond. And that's you categorized him so well.
Yeah.
Also that element of goal setting
Yeah.
him, so people can be two different types, a primary and a secondary.
Yeah. And I think that's so important too, because one of the ways that Cav and I differ is I am challenge responsive, but I think I'm more of the goal oriented than the challenge responsive piece. So of course if there's a challenge, I feel like I can rise to it. But if I don't have a goal, and to your point, that stretch goal, then I feel like I'm kind of wandering and lost. And one of the things, so I read a description to Kavanaugh for the challenge responsive, and I said, does this sound like you? He said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I feel. And so it's interesting for him to also get language, because he said to me, I was starting to think that something was wrong with me. Like, I know I'm capable of doing more, but it's almost like, he kept saying, it was almost like I had blinders on. And I
Mm.
said, yeah, the brain is such an interesting muscle, right? When we have, even, I forget what I'm sure there's a scientific name for it, but when we smell something that smells bad, it bothers us, right? We think about it for a while, until, if we're in that environment long enough, the smell doesn't go away. Our perception of it goes away, right? Our brain says it's no longer important, is no danger to you, you can, we can stop thinking about it. And so I explained that kind of analogy to him as well. And I said, I think what happens with you is if there is no goal and no challenge. And the beauty part of it is you don't have to wait for someone to give you the challenge. You can give it to yourself, right? We can start to create scenarios or, visualize the challenge. We don't have to wait for an external force to give it to us. But when you don't have that challenge, it's like your brain that no longer can smell that smell, right? Your brain no longer sees this as a competitive environment. And so you just almost mimic the people around you, if not just coast. And he was like, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly what I do. And so giving him language, and also to your point, Lynn, of giving him strategies. Okay, if this is what we know really excites you and activates you, how can we mirror that in a way that one doesn't add stress? Because I was like, a challenge responsive person, that could quickly be something that adds anxiety and stress if we're not careful, right? But how can we challenge you but also empower you to feel like you can be successful? And so we brainstorm a list of different things that he can do. And one of them is every time he comes up to bat, he wants to give himself a different scenario. Like it's the bottom of the sixth, 2 outs, championship game. If I get a single, we win. Right? It doesn't need to be a home run, but if I get a single, we win. And so we ran through a couple different scenarios that he could quickly tell himself. And so he did it yesterday at practice. And he was like, Mom, it worked. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I hit the ball. He said, but it's not even that. He said, the ball almost felt like it slowed down and I could see the seams of the ball. And it was like I was so locked in. I've never been that locked in my life. And it was
Awesome.
such a gratifying moment because I'm like, wow, imagine if we could identify and put language to the type of motivation our child has or our athlete has. Give them language to empower themselves and even to advocate, right? Because in some cases he could advocate with his coach of what really motivates him. And more importantly, give them strategies that they can be using themselves to really unlock their game and take it to that next level. Like that's really where we can get to a whole nother level of youth sports.
Absolutely. And you were talking about the reticular activated system.
Yes.
That field takes in all the smells, visuals, all those things that are happening on a minute by minute basis, and it filters out what's important. So what you're doing with asking Kavanagh to focus on a scenario, you were filtering out the extraneous noise.
Right.
And he was purely focused. That was a great job. And in teams as well, there are going to be individuals with all different motivation styles. But pulling them all together and recognizing each one as an individual, because each child, each athlete is an individual, but then pulling each one together and building on their strengths and using that specific language for each individual will help them all soar as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll just quickly kind of go through just at a high level. Again, Lynn says we have a document that we can share, but that challenge responsive athlete or person is someone that they need that external challenge, right? So whether it is they need to defy the odds to kind of really activate their brain to step up and have that peak performance. The goal oriented person or athlete is going to want to have a milestone, like a specific thing that they want to achieve, and that's what allows them to help them get hyper focused. Then you have the identity driven. In that case, that athlete's kind of self-worth is tied into them viewing themselves as an athlete. So for them, they don't necessarily need the rewards, but what really motivates them is protecting that identity that they want to come across as a hard worker or a leader or an elite athlete. So that identity piece is really important for them, and they're focused on making sure they do the training or the performance piece to kind of protect that identity. Then you have team-based, which is actually one of Kavanagh's really good friends. He's a team-based. When I looked at this definition, I was like, that it seems exactly like his best friend. They want to make their team members proud, right? So it's less about the individual performance and more about the social aspect, right? Like, what does my team think of me? How can I get my team to really admire what I do? How can I be a good team member and elevate the team? So it's less again about the individual, but more about the team and relationship-driven motivations. And then the routine responsive, which I am definitely not, is somebody that's very disciplined, right? They love the checklist. They love the training logs. They love the schedule, right? And they really get motivated and enjoyment out of being able to check those things off the list. If they don't have a list, they don't feel as focused or as successful. And then the last one is the recognition base. So those are those athletes that really do like the validation, right? They like the praise, they like the high fives, they like the coaches being excited because they did really well. And so, that comes with a different set of motivators and a different set of strategies that particular athlete or the parent of that type of athlete would need to make sure that person still feels like they're getting recognition without it now being solely focused on them always having to be praised.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you went through all the 6, you could have all 6 on your team.
Oh, yes.
And you've seen that where people turn up and maybe they go to hit the ball and they don't hit it. And then they come back and they're chuntering to themselves or,
Right.
talking to themselves negatively, usually, whatever.
Yep.
Is that because they are team down? Or it's their own motivation that they don't feel they're good enough?
Right.
And so getting to understand what's causing that. Is it, that they didn't feel challenged enough or that they didn't achieve their goal? What is it that causes that? But helping them understand that not only failure is part of the challenge, part of the actual game, but also understanding their own sort of type so that they can understand how they can respond. And that's where the coaching comes in, because picking up the nuances of what somebody is saying and how they're saying it, then you can pull in what type of athlete they are and then work with them to help them. You're not trying to change them. You're just trying to show them that they understand their type. Like you did with Kavanaugh, you said, this is, you read out some of the, and he said, yes, that's me. And then you gave him a solution as to how to work with what he had, work with his particular type.
Right. And it's interesting because when you give that example, like whether someone strikes out or they get it out and they come back and they're upset, I think so not that relationships aren't important to a person. So my first thought would be, if I was in a situation like that where I failed, I would either have it tied to my goal of, oh my gosh, I'm never going to reach my goal, versus someone else could be saying, oh my gosh, I let my team down. Right. So very different perspectives. And so as a coach, if you're coming in and saying, oh, don't worry about it, you'll get it next time, that might help for that person where the focus is on them as an individual. But if you know that athlete is really relationship oriented, coming and saying, hey, don't worry about it, you did so great for the team, that's going to speak to them in a different way, right? Because that's where their motivation is. That's where the frustration is coming from, because they feel like they're letting down a group of people. And so I thought it was like, I sat there just thinking of all the different ways I need to now change the feedback I give so that it resonates for Kavanaugh in a way where he can immediately apply it, right? Because if I'm like, oh, the team is great, don't worry about the team, his focus isn't necessarily on the team. His focus is on feeling like he failed the challenge, right? And so just doing those small little nuances when I give feedback is going to really be helpful for him to take what I'm saying and then be able to apply it, right, in a way that feels authentic to him.
Yeah, and when I'm I'll be using that as well when I'm coaching him on his mindset, but not just for the baseball, but for the rest of the things he's doing. Because knowing now we've kind of worked it through even more, we can use that to help him to soar based on his particular skill set and type. So awesome. It's interesting to see how different athletes behave, like you say, when they're either something goes wrong or something goes right. Even people when something goes right, they might behave in a totally different way. And when baseball players, maybe the athlete isn't goal oriented, they just want to sort of be part of the game, or they're kind of deep team based. They might be goofing off because they just think they're part of the team. But to somebody who's challenge responsive or goal oriented, they're goofing off and they're not being serious about this game. And so understanding each other will help. Well, those that are just having fun because they're more about team and relationships, they're kind of like, chill, man, chill, what's the problem?
Right. Right. They feel like they're doing their part, right, by being a good team member.
But if we can kind of get the two to understand each other and how each other ticks, you can think, oh, that's why somebody's doing that or saying that. And you can understand together a bit more.
Exactly. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So I appreciate you guys joining
Yeah.
us on a Friday morning. So I'll make sure that we include the link to that document that Lynn shared in the description. There's also in the description a link to book a call with Lynn. Lynn has been working with Kavanaugh for over a year now, and I can tell you that prior to Lynn, I was getting Kavanaugh the best training he could ever find, but we weren't still having the performance that he wanted to. And it wasn't until we got mindset support that helped all those physical things we had been doing really click. So if you're in a space, regardless of whether you're a baseball athlete, if you have, an athlete of any type, or even if you're a leader and you could use some support with mindset, Lynn is definitely the person to reach out to. So there's a link in the description of this video that allow you to do that, to get a complimentary 15-minute call with Lynn to kind of set the basis for what mindset support, mindset coaching could help with for you, your athlete. So outside of that, I don't know if you have any closing words.
No, I mean, it's been a pleasure coaching Kavanaugh and seeing him soar. I just love when he comes back and tells me what he's done and what he's achieved. And he listens so well and adopts the tools we talk about. And that's what's helping him, because
Yeah.
he listens and he does exactly what we say. And then a combination with you and what you're doing, because as you often hear the conversations I'm having with Kavanaugh
Mm-hmm.
room, then you're kind of strengthening what
Yep.
we're doing. So it's helping him to just continue to soar. I'll put this document, it is a document at the moment. What I'm going to do is put it into a table so
Okay.
that it's a little bit easier to read, and then
Sure.
but I'll put it in the link. I'll send the link out or put it into the live.
Okay.
Just point of view of making it easier for people
No,
to
no, that works. That's perfect. Listen, I'll
identify.
take easy all day.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. But you will definitely hear more from Lynn and I on several different fronts, not even just on the mindset piece. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. For those that celebrate, happy
Yeah,
Easter.
perfect. Happy Easter, everybody. Like Lacey says, for everybody that celebrates, have a safe weekend. Have a sunny weekend, hopefully. And we'll